What if your spouse dies first? This is probably the most difficult conversation, but it's probably the most important thing to have. What happens if your spouse dies? What does that mean for you financially? What does it mean for you for your benefits? My name is Momodou Bojang. I spent decades helping federal government employees to make a profound retirement. That way they can enjoy their retirement. Today we're here with Josephine Bojang, not only my partner in life, but also my partner in business as well. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing, partner?
Good. I'm doing awesome. Well, this is very, very important, right? So we're talking about spouse dies first, right? So who will go first, right? Maybe I'll go first, right? But anyway, so what we
they say women live longer. So.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. Well, the hence no reason why we should plan, right? But today, what we want to do is let's think about a client scenario that we have. As you know, we have privilege of helping countless federal government employees who are going into retirement, have some concerns about their retirement, what their benefits look like, and they'll come to us and be able to demystify that for them. That way they can make smart choices. In this particular scenario, we do have a client who he is in the federal government, obviously retired, very healthy, appears to be healthy. We didn't have any concerns and all that. Retired, maybe a few months, had like some sort of diagnosed, and then eventually they had to go through that, but then eventually he passed, but then he has a surviving spouse. So if you recall when we're having that conversations about what benefits that they need to pick and all that. So as most people would probably know or don't know, as a federal employee, depending on the type of benefit selections that you make upon retirement in your retirement application, that can determine how much money with the survivor benefit or the surviving spouse will get. I think in this scenario, we're talking about, hey, should I waive this survivor's spousal benefit or should you keep it? But I think in this scenario, thank God we are able to help them make the right choice. So what usually happens in that scenario if one spouse passes? What's the scenario for the surviving spouse?
Yeah, I mean, when we think about the clients that, that this happened to, thank goodness he chose the full survivor benefit, because this allows her as the surviving spouse to have a portion of his pension for the rest of her life. And that's obviously, gives peace of mind, helps to pay some of the bills because she still has a mortgage to pay. And that basically helps to cover that in addition to just the healthcare expenses, everything. And these days, things are getting more expensive.
Yeah.
So just having that extra income coming in just gives her peace of mind, even though, you can't remove that emotional distress or the emotional, piece of not having that person around anymore. But if you can just lift the burden, if we can help folks, lift the burden of the financial distress, I mean, that it goes way, way longer. And it just helps to, for them to feel better about everything.
Yeah. And I know this is very hard for you to talk about because I can sense, you can get very emotional about this kind of conversations, right?
But stories.
We'll give it a try. But, if you think about while we're having a conversation at that point, talking about this survivor benefit, I think their first inclination is no, we just need to waive it because we don't need it because with the impression that it's probably going to live longer. But thank God we're able to show them about the cost benefit of it.
Exactly. I think no one can predict the future, right? Mm-hmm. And no one can predict when, someone could be healthy one day and all of a sudden something happens to them. I mean, someone could be in a car accident and, something happens, right? So, but I think the mistakes that a lot of people make when they're looking at that particular benefit is the cost. Mm-hmm. How much is this going to cost me?
Absolutely.
How much is my pension going to be reduced by? I don't want to do that. They're not thinking about, okay, what's the reason for having that protection in place? What is the risk element? And a lot of times, I think for us women, we think about all the risks that are associated in life. I think, I hate to say this, but you men don't tend to want to think about those things, whether it's, just like it's never going to happen to me, or, whatever other reason it might be, right? Like it's just,
Yeah.
or I don't want to talk about things like that. But women tend to really be able to kind of foresee things that might impact overall, like, from a risk planning perspective. So,
No, I think you're absolutely right, because I say this all the time. It doesn't mean that for every man, but I think
Right.
men sometimes, our brains are not wired that way. But I think women tend to look at things, plan ahead, so that way they can, because they want to have that sense of like security, right? And I think I vividly remember when we showed the cost of basically saying that, hey, you know what, you're gonna get the 10% reduction in your pension, and then we show like 10 years what that cost will look like, and then the first thing was like, well, why do I need this, right? Because at that
Yep.
point, what he's only looking at that amount, but we insist that I think it's a great thing for you to do that, because one of the things that we always like to talk to people about is, hey, if we know exactly when somebody will die, we'll design a perfect plan for them, right? And
There's no such
unfortunately,
thing.
yes,
Right.
exactly. Unfortunately, we cannot do it. But I think thinking about what really happened and then having our conversation with the surviving spouse, I think she was just grateful that we're able to kind of like convince and show the plan that this makes sense for him to have select that full survivor benefit. Because now, what does she do now? She actually be able to enjoy, at least, well, not enjoy, but live a
She
retirement that's
can,
meaningful.
right. She doesn't have that financial
Yep.
burden. But I think also in her case, there was not an option to not select one of the two, right? Because if they waived it completely, then she wouldn't have any health insurance,
Well, that's big.
right?
That's big, yeah.
And I get it. Like right now, I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'll just go to the marketplace or whatever. But it's like, if you have a great plan and you're covered pretty much for the rest of your life, and the plan itself has such great benefits, why would you waive that
Yeah.
to go on something else that you just, who knows what that's going to look like over time, right?
Yeah, and that's key, because that health insurance is big, and a lot of times people don't know this. That the fact that when you waive that survivor benefit, you're not gonna have that pension. So in that scenario, she would not have that health insurance,
insurance,
right?
yeah.
And then mainly because she's not a federal employee, so we're able to
Exactly.
do that. And now what that means is, not only she gets her pension, the survivor benefit pension, but she also gets the health insurance to carry for the rest of her life. And then we talk about the other assets as well that she can get, at least that way emotionally, like you said before, emotionally, we're not going to be able to take that emotional distress, but financially, at least she has like a peace of mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
I guess, from your point of view, obviously, we deal with a lot of like, female, clients or spouses, and then we'll sit in a meeting together as business partners or husband and wife. I think you do a great job like connecting with, the spouses, to actually maybe get the most out of them that I'm not able to do. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I mean, I think it's for me, it's just natural. It just comes natural. Like one of my goals and my purpose is to make everyone feel happy, right? When they interact with us, I want to make sure that they feel good about what we're telling them, and then how can we help them so that they can retire happy, right? So, I think for me, it's important, and also being a female, whether it's in corporate world or maybe sometimes even with you, like a lot of times the males take over, right? Like they take over the conversation. When it comes to finances, we see this a lot. When it's a married couple, usually the husband's handling a lot of things. Not always, but in most cases, the husband's handling everything, and the wife doesn't really know much about what's going on. And I think it's important that they do stay in tune.
Yeah.
Because men are great, but you don't know everything, right? And so I think it's important when we get in those meetings, I want her voice to also be heard. I want her to be aware. And in some cases, she's the federal employee.
Yeah.
Right? It's not always the male that's the federal employee. And then we also have, other same-sex couples. So, I mean, it's just, I think for me as a woman, it's just making sure that everyone is aware. I think a lot of times, I also have the Women in Finance series, and we talk about things like that where women aren't heard sometimes, or they're afraid to speak up because in the corporate world, maybe they've been shot down before. So then it's kind of like, okay, well, if you do this to me a couple times, then maybe I'll just keep quiet. And I don't think that's the right way to plan your future, right? You've got to be part of it. You've got to be curious about what could happen. And we see this a lot when we go to our workshops that we have, and when the spouses come that are non-federal. I always ask them, like, how was your day? Like, what did you think of all this information? They're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I came because I didn't know all of this. And he or she didn't know all of this, right, as the federal employee. And so I think, not only are we helping federal employees feel better or more educated about how their benefits work, I think it's equally important to make sure that the spouses understand how everything works. They are part of the picture.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And that's why we always stress the importance of when you go into these retirement workshops or even having these report meetings is very, very important that you have the spouse there, because we just don't know what would happen, right? At least, having them there to understand the other side of the benefits, I think makes it very, very worthwhile, right? Now, I have to bring this up because, we deal with this a lot, especially you mentioned the scenarios where the spouse is the federal employee, and then probably the husband is not. And then we have a great conversation with them, and then the spouse, who's a federal employee, felt like this is great. This is a good plan. We want to move forward. And then the husband, who's not a federal employee, would probably say, no, we're not going to move forward. I think that's always a very difficult thing for us. I mean, after that meeting, what can you give them an insight what happens after the meeting, like our conversation?
Aside from me telling you, like, why are men so stubborn?
Yeah.
You're never like that, right?
Well, no, I'm not like that. Definitely not. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's a shame because we see scenarios where we can help people and they've done a great job, right? So don't get me wrong. It's not like they're in a bad position. Sometimes they've done a good job, but if we put the plan in place that we're talking about, things that they haven't thought about, it's like going from here to here. Right. And so it's just a shame and a lot of times it comes down to control, I feel like, right? They don't want to let go of the control of somebody else handling their finances, even though we tell them like, hey, we're partners in this journey, right? We're like the guides. So we're not taking over everything, but we're the guides because we know what to look for, right? I know you always like to say, like, it's almost like if you're going to battlefield and we're the ones that know where all the landmines are,
absolutely.
right? Because they don't know and they're just stepping around, and what could happen, unfortunately, if you step in the wrong place, right? And so, I don't know. I just feel like, and it's not always the male, right? Sometimes it's the female.
Yeah, that's true.
So we can't broad brush everything, I know, but typically, yes, that's what happens is like, it's because of control, whether it's, I personally like to look at the accounts and kind of do this myself, or they just don't want somebody else, like I said, back to control again, right? Like they feel like they're losing control. And I get it. It's hard you saved up all your life. It's kind of hard, like the business that we're in, to just be like, okay, I don't know what exactly you're going to give me, because it's not like something physical. It's not like somebody's driving off with a car, right? But then I have to trust that you're going to do all the things that you said you're going to do. And I'm also handing over my life savings to you. I get it. It's tough, right? But I think it's important to have a plan, right? Absolutely. That's the key difference. If you've planned something out, the outcome is going to be so much better than when you're just winging it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Well, that's true. So it reminds me of, I'm not going to name names, but in one of the client meetings, obviously the wife is the federal government employee, done very well. They came to the office, and in this specific case, we're looking at more like the tax burden, right?
Yeah.
The retirement tax burden. And clearly it's very evident, from our point of view, and then from his point of view, like, wow, we have a tax problem.
Absolutely.
And then, but she wanted to do it. She wanted to move forward and be able to, but then he's like, nope, we're not going to do that because he wants control. Because I think he said he looks at that statement
Nice
like
looking every
single
day,
month,
right.
yeah, every day, and which in itself is not very healthy.
Right. Especially as you get older, right? Like sometimes when the market does certain things, you're gonna probably like to have a panic attack if you're
Yeah.
looking at your balance. But I mean, I think that's the key. I think as a spouse, regardless, male, female, sometimes you have to push back a little bit on things, I still think about them. I know exactly who you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
I still think about them and it's like, wow, I hope they're in a good place. I hope they're going to be okay. But why would you unnecessarily, and we're not talking about like $1,000, $10,000. We're talking about like millions of dollars that you are willing to just pay to the politicians or the IRS, right? The government, when that could be kept. Like it could be your money that you can keep more of that, right?
And in this scenario, because they don't have kids, and I think C actually mentioned to say, look, I'd rather even give that to the siblings, right?
Siblings,
Yeah. So
charity, I mean, anybody else, right? And so it's just a shame with situations like that, someone can't get out of their own way. Like it's almost like they're just thinking about themselves versus the ramifications. Because the other thing is, because women tend to live longer, well, again, we don't know the scenarios, what will actually happen, but because women tend to live longer, well, at some point, he's not going to be in the picture and she's going to be dealing with all of this on her own.
Absolutely.
And we already know she can't. Like we had
Exactly.
that conversation with her, right? And she's like, I wouldn't know what to do. So now he's actually doing her a disservice if that ends up happening, because she's going to be lost on her own. Hopefully she'll find us again. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we've had another.
We stay in touch. I mean, so that hopefully that will happen.
And we also had another scenario where that was the exact scenario where the husband was controlling. Yep. Well, and in this scenario, we don't wish this on everyone, right? But they ended up getting a divorce, and then she came back to talk to us, and now she's a client. Right. This is a whole different scenario, but yes.
But you know what was interesting about that though? But what was interesting about that though, because we asked, hey, we thought we had a great conversation initially when you came in here. We thought you had a great conversation. Well, what happened? And then she opened up, right? She opened up exactly. So that's a perfect example whereby, you know what, felt like this is good, this is great, and then we all had a conversation. And the spouse sitting there pretend that this is great, we're going to move forward. And then they left, and then come to find they don't want to move forward. And they all become, what we found out? We found out that it's because of him, right?
And so, again, it's like, I mean, how many times do I tell the kids, like, it just takes one bad decision that changes the whole trajectory of your life.
Absolutely.
It's exactly the same thing.
Right. So I'm hoping that, so if you're a federal government employee and then, married spouse, please listen to this conversation, because we see this all the time. You want to make sure that you can make smart choices. Make sure take the emotions out of this or the control out of it, and think about your planning, because someday, unless this is like a perfect thing whereby both of you hold hands like we do and we both die together, but other than that, somebody will have to go first, and then you have to think about the surviving spouse, the tax consequences, right? The financial distress, the fact that they're going to be left kind of like, confused where they're going to get all these accounts from. Talking about if they don't even know, or they're not handling the finances now, what is that going to look like? So please think about those, and then be able to make choices that can benefit for both of you while you're here or if you're not here. So please, make sure that you subscribe to this channel, because this is where we bring in information that can help you to make a profound difference in your retirement. Until then, we'll see you later, and don't forget to subscribe.